1976 VW. Right, welcome to my YouTube video. This is of a VW Beetle, classic Beetle, 1976. It's fuel injected, and the componentry for these cars is becoming rarer and rarer every year to obtain, especially for the L-Ject engine. The front of the car doesn't have indicators in the fenders, as you can see, but in the bumper, in the front bumper. So this was one of the little telltale signs that the car was being modified as the years went by, and as VW tried to keep up with technology, as all cars were moving on at the time. You can see this Beetle doesn't have front vents on the hood, and this is because it has an aircon system built in, an aftermarket aircon system. I've done a few modifications to this car, namely, and we'll go through these as we go around. I placed drop spindles on the front to drop this front suspension down, and also changed the lights, headlights for LED, which I purchased from aircool.net. They were easy to install and are much brighter and use much less battery. The other thing with this 1976 is that in the States, in order to make the VW engine more compliant with exhaust and emissions control, they introduced an EGR system, exhaust gas recirculation, where in theory some of the exhaust gas is recycled back into the engine to reduce emissions. They did a couple of other things as well. They placed a filter, and they changed the timing on the engine, and you'll see this in the Bentley manual that bugs around 74, 75, 76 onwards are actually timed at 5 degrees after top dead center instead of 7.5 before. And this is all part of the process of reducing emissions. You can see here from the front of the car, I've placed some MP Cosmo rims on, 4x130s, and the only issue I had here was with rubbing of the fenders, so I had to reduce the tire size. The other thing, of course, is that you need to reduce the tire size to get clearance when you're turning the wheels. The back of the car, I'm just going to grab a torch here so we can just have a look under the front. I am actually commentating post filming this, so if you hear me hesitating, this is why. You can see in the front here is the horn. There's two horns there. There's the big orange one, which is the one you heard earlier on in the clip, and I've disconnected the standard one, which is just below it. You'll see just behind the horn is a radiator, and this is for the aircon unit. And with the drop suspension, the clearance is very low, and I live in a bumpy area, a lot of hills, speed bumps on the roads, and this proves to be a little bit of a problem. But it seems that the front of the car actually hits first before the radiator does. Just switching on the torch, the flashlight here, just so that you can see a little bit better. I'm filming in the garage, so it's pretty dark, but inside I give you a quick view there of the central fire extinguisher that I've placed, as well as the speakers, kick panel speakers. Those are MP kick panel covers. There's the aircon system, and those louvers were broken when I purchased the car, so I hunted those down and eventually purchased some off Facebook Marketplace by a user who lives in Mexico. The front is a leather dash, which came out in this year, and in the center you'll see there's a 2-speed fan that was introduced, I think, in 72, 73. I'm just pointing at it, and it's been disconnected in this vehicle because of the aircon system. Next to it is a little light, and that light comes on when the handbrake is up, and I think that was part of the roadworthy in various territories. I've placed just a standard radio in here for the time being, nothing classical, and I'll get back to that later. Moving on to the back, I've installed further speakers. Here I've just taken out the ashtray because I've been moving the back seat. I've got some speakers in the rear underneath the cover. There's two 6x9s and a subwoofer, 10-inch. Those are driven by these two amps. They're Pioneer amps, 1000 watt amps. Don't think they give out 1000 watts, but anyway, they're both there, and the two amps drive the 6 speakers plus the subwoofer. I've also connected this audio capacitor just to help with sound. Problem, of course, was that the batteries, when it was still a single battery, was draining very quickly, and so I had to install 2 batteries which are sitting underneath these amps, connected in parallel. The one amp drives the 4 front speakers, and the other amp drives the 2 rear 6x9s and the subwoofer. On the front dash, I replaced these bezels. I purchased them off a VW site in the UK, and I was able to do that to avoid cutting up the original dash. They fit quite nicely and they look quite nice. The center speedo is in kilometers per hour, and on the fuel injected models there was a small little sign, you can just see it underneath the 40 kilometer, that says CAT. It's a bright blue light that switches on when the CAT needs to be serviced. So some of these had catalytic converters, this one doesn't, but it does have an EGR filter which supposedly needs to be replaced every 15,000 Ks. They do rust out, and you just press a little button on the back of the speedo and it resets the CAT light. The center console, the gear shifter I've replaced from the original one for one of these vintage speed gear shifters. This is the classic look. They make different styles and different shapes and colors. It has nice tight shifting, and it makes the car an absolute pleasure to drive. The upholstery in this car is period correct. I had a quick look on Samba on the charts and the tables, so I presume this is actually the original upholstery that was in the vehicle. The only add-ons, of course, are the two safety belts at the back, the restrainers, and that was just for vehicle safety. The front have these retractable safety belts that sometimes rub on the back seat, causing grooving when you're trying to remove that back seat to work on the battery or any of the components underneath. Back of the car, this is a 4-slat louver made by a company called Piranha. They don't produce these louvers anymore. In fact, I think the company doesn't exist anymore. And these were produced in South Africa, and a very generous VW enthusiast in Johannesburg had this shipped out to me. You can see it's a little bit smaller than the actual window. VW changed the size of this window in, I think it was in 72 or 73, to make it larger, so that's why the louver looks a little bit small. Apparently you can get a 5-slat louver from the States. They're like hen's teeth, very difficult to get hold of, but period correct. These were very popular in the 70s, and you see other vehicles driving around, non-VW cars that have these from the 70s. There is a bit of a resurgence. Louvers are coming back in vogue again for these cars, for the classics, and it's there is talk of people making them again. Rear lights are the large round ones, elephant footprints or elephant paws or whatever they're called. And if you look at the back here, the actual apron's a little bit enlarged for the exhaust muffler that runs horizontally across the back here. One way to tell a fuel injected VW driving down the road is that it only has one exhaust pipe. So if you see that, that's a quick glance to tell what model of bug this is. In the Californian bugs, the muffler is half the size, and they have the catalytic converter in between, which isn't on this one. This is an ANSA exhaust muffler, which I bought off the internet. The heater boxes are square. You can see they're not the normal classic round ones, and those came out on the fuel injected bugs or on some of the superbugs as well. If you have a look, there's a black pipe which I purchased off eBay. It was quite expensive, but it was the last piece that I needed to put this exhaust system back together again. Yeah, I'm just pointing at it now, and that goes to the filter that I was talking about earlier on that feeds into the EGR. I'll try and get a picture of it here. It's just underneath the car. There it is, and that's what you replace every 15,000 Ks. The deck lid has 4 horizontal air vents, which I think were introduced in 72. I just put this new seal, this deck lid seal, which actually fits onto a lip in the actual deck lid. It took about 15 minutes to fit, and I purchased it off eBay for about $30 off a VW Enthusiast, and it works the same as the original seal that goes on the body of the vehicle. This is the L-Jet 1600 engine, standard 1600. It's an AJ block, and other than that, it's just really the top that's a little bit different. It's got fuel injectors, and the theory behind these engines is that the fuel is injected in. Spark plugs are the same, but it regulates on the air. So you basically adjust the air that's going into the engine, whereas with the carbureted engines, you're actually adjusting the fuel mix, and that's done by that air intake that you can see on the top right. So engine bay looks pretty full, and that's because of the AC compressor on the left that tends to fill up quite a bit of the space. It's a bit tricky to try and change the spark plugs on these things, but if you strip back the air filter on the right hand side, you take that off, and you can get down to the spark plugs okay. The other thing here, you can see the EGR pipe coming up between the alternator and the air compressor. It goes up into a valve that switches on and off depending on your revs. So if you're idling, that valve is open and it's recycling the exhaust. As soon as you start to accelerate, that valve closes. I've added these pipes, these air pipes for the heaters. These are solid. They're made out of aluminum or no, I don't know if they're aluminum. I think they might be steel. They don't perforate like the thin, flimsy aluminum ones, and they'll fit on all models. So not just these versions. That was from CSP Performance. That's CSP, and I'm happy I fitted those. Those are good. The other thing here is that the distributor was originally an 044 dual canister vacuum advanced retard, and that was also part of the emission system. I do have it. I've taken it out and put this one in because for two reasons. One, I couldn't really tune the engine to reliably sit at 5 degrees after top dead center at idle, and then advance to 7.5 before top dead center on acceleration. So I pulled it out and I put this one in. This is just El Cheapo, but what I was able to do with this one is lock out the weights, and you can see I don't use the canister as well because I've linked it or connected it to a CB Performance black box, which allows me to connect a laptop to the engine. I'm just showing you, there's the black box there on the corner. And once you link it up to the laptop, you can actually set the individual timing. Pretty much there's about 140 different settings you can change, and you can pretty much change the timing on all RPMs. So if you want to change it for freeway driving, you can do it, and you can do it on the fly as well. So you can have your laptop plugged in and change those settings as you're driving along to see where your engine responds the best. A lot of fuel injected components are pulled off these engines and they're converted back to carburetor engines, which it's fairly easy to do, and I think people sometimes are intimidated by what these look like, so that's why they switch them back, or maybe even just too lazy to read through the manual. The Bosch manual that is available for L-Jet is pretty comprehensive and has an awesome fault finding set of flowcharts to find any issues. As I said, the components are becoming pretty rare to purchase.